we've been talking about bodhicitta and developing it. This text doesn't go into depth in the different methods of developing bodhicitta, but it said, like me, the countless living beings have been wandering in cyclic existence. Many times they have been apparent to me and shown radiant kindness to me. How unworthy not to respond to their sorrow. For the sake of all living beings, we must strive in the practices bringing enlightenment. Okay? So just, it goes to the conclusion of, the sentient beings have been so kind, and it would be really, unthinkably ungrateful to not respond and want to repay that. And then the way to repay it is for the sake of all living beings. We must strive in the practices bringing enlightenment. So those are the 6 far-reaching practices, the 6 paramitas, which are often broken into 10. They can be subdivided into 10 paramitas. Although this text, talks of the kindness of our parents, I think it's really worthwhile to think a lot of the kindness of all living beings, for the fact that they exist and that we receive benefit from them. And so we've talked about this a lot before, but I don't think we can emphasize it too much, is just to look around and take any one object, your sweater, your spoon, your napkin, your bowl, and mentally trace back all the different beings that were involved with your having your bowl. Where did it come from? And our bowls are, the monastic bowls made out of metal. So where did the metal come from? And it's surely, an alloy, not a pure metal. So who mixed it together? Who transported it? What country was it made in? Where did the machinery that put the metal together come from? Who made the truck that transported the metal from the mines? And who mined it? And who planned the mines? And, when you go back like this, there's just a infinite beginning to our having our bowl to eat lunch in, okay? Because you get into, well, where did the food come for that nourished the truck drivers that drove the metal from the mine to the plant, And it just becomes completely radiating out. So we really see how related and how dependent we are on everybody. And if we keep that mind, that awareness in our mind too, then again it becomes, how unworthy if we don't repay that kindness, because we've received so much from other living beings. So just saying, oh yeah, it came from somewhere and they did it as their job to make a living and they didn't do it especially for me, so why should I care anyway? That's part of that ignorant mind, isn't it? That ignorant mind that's not seeing the big picture and how dependent we are. Yeah? And so again, to see that and really respond with a mind that realizes ourselves as the recipient of a tremendous amount of kindness. Yeah. I remember many years ago, well, I can tell you what year it was. It was in 1977. After I was ordained, I went up to Laudo. A few of us followed Lama Zopa Rinpoche up to Laudo. And Rinpoche was telling the story there, because they mostly eat potatoes. There's not a lot of other food. And he said that one time some of the villagers who came to visit him brought him some potatoes to eat. And when he thought about the kindness and how hard they had to work and everything they did to get those potatoes that they then brought to offer to him, he said he just stood there. It's like he couldn't bring himself to eat them because they were so precious and contained so much, overwhelming kindness, that when he thought about, how can I ever repay this, he couldn't see how to do that. And that's for a small bag of potatoes, But you can see that, for somebody like Rinpoche who really meditates deeply on this, it has a very profound effect on the mind where you really feel connected to other living beings. Yeah. In feeling connected to other living beings, it's very important that we have equanimity and that we don't overemphasize our connection to one living being over another living being, even though some living beings may have in this particular life helped us more than others, because what they've done in this life is just this life. In previous lives, those same sentient beings killed us and were our enemies, and other sentient beings were kind to us. So it's very important that we don't solidify different sentient beings and develop attachment to them. They were my parents in this life, therefore they've been kinder to me than any other living being ever throughout my whole infinite beginningless samsaric history. That's not true. Yeah? So we want to really cherish all living beings and feel the kindness of all living beings. Because when we select a few out to feel kindness, to really see their kindness and don't generalize it, then our realization of kindness turns into attachment. And then we become very attached to those people. And as we know, the more attached we are to somebody, the more we suffer. Yeah, because when we're attached, we are projecting, what Jeffrey was talking about this morning, Troa, we're projecting, exaggerating somebody's good qualities and putting, all those good qualities in such that we don't see their problems and so on. And then we cling, and then when we have to be separated from them, we're completely torn up inside and miserable. Yeah? And so that attitude of attachment, is very different from real love, because attachment inevitably brings us pain and anguish. Yeah? Whereas with love, we can just love those people simply because they exist and wish them well, and love everybody and wish them well. Yeah? And then we don't suffer so much when something happens to one being and not another, And similarly, when we see people suffering, not to grab onto the suffering of those we're attached to, and more than the suffering of other living beings, because everybody's been kind to us. And also, suffering is the nature of cyclic existence, isn't it? It's just the way things are. And it's awful, and that's why we want to get out and why we want to help everybody else get out. But seeing suffering and then just getting so overwhelmed by our agony of seeing others suffering, that prevents us from actually doing anything about the suffering. Yeah, because our attachment makes our mind in so much mental anguish that we can't reach out to anybody. Yeah? And so, of course, as people who admire bodhicitta, we don't want to be like that. We want to really be able to reach out and connect with everybody, no matter what the relationship they have with us this life. Because when we see the big picture in many lives, everybody's been kind, and everybody hasn't been kind. But here we're really looking at the kindness, and accepting that samsara is what it is, and using that to fuel our renunciation. not using seeing their suffering to fuel our agony and distress and anguish and so on. Okay? So this is very important when we're trying to meditate on love and compassion. And reality is what it is, you know. So we have the choice, we can accept it or we can reject it. When we reject reality, what happens? Yeah. You know, when we reject reality, does it make reality change? No. Yeah. So we have to notice when our own mind is rejecting reality and bring it back and say, you know, this is simply how it is, you know. This is what I was talking about this morning, you know, seeing the nature of something. The nature of cyclic existence is unsatisfactory. And there's nobody we can complain to about it and say they should change the nature of cyclic existence and make it great. Yeah, the only thing we can do is say, let's get out. And so let's put our energy into developing bodhicitta and developing wisdom. Yeah, and then at least we can be joyful about practicing.